This dramatic change is the result of a rift between a once friendly duo, Sudan's army chief Abdel Fattah al-Burhan and the head of the paramilitary rapid support forces, Mohammed Hamdan Dagalo. Fighting quickly spread between the two forces, with the RSF gaining some ground. While the region initially reacted with alarm to RSF advances, a diplomatic tour and the stunning fall of a key state have twisted and thickened the plot in the last 9 months. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. To understand what has been happening in Sudan in recent months, we need to look at who the RSF are. The Rapid Support Forces stem from the Janjaweed militia. Remember them? Janjaweed, which means devils on horseback, were an assortment of militias and tribes with roots stemming from the late 1980s. They were recruited in the early 2000s during the Second Sudanese Civil War to quell an anti-government uprising in the Darfur region. They were accused of carrying out widespread massacres of the Fur, Masalit, and Zaghawa peoples in the early 2000s with the government's tacit approval. Around 300,000 people were killed, and 2 million more were driven from their homes in that period. One figure who rose through the ranks of the Janjaweed is Dagalo of the Rizaigat tribe. The Janjaweed grew over time and eventually evolved into the RSF in 2013, with its members used as border guards. Under Dagalo's leadership, the RSF was tasked with crushing several rebellions in Sudan. As RSF's ranks swelled, Dagalo, also known as Hemeti, took control of several gold mines. This wealth made him a formidable figure in Sudanese politics. This became quite apparent in 2018 when he threw his backing behind a protest movement that erupted calling for the ouster of President Omar al-Bashir. The military booted Bashir out in 2019, but competing spheres of influence persisted between the RSF and the army. 4 months later, this led to a transitional joint military-civilian council, under which Dagalo and Burhan would share power until elections, which were slated for 2023. In the meantime, Abdallah Hamdok, Sudan's top civilian leader, was appointed prime minister and leader of the transitional cabinet. But an attempted coup by the RSF in 2021 derailed Sudan's transition to civilian rule. Fast forward to early 2023, when talks were held to facilitate a political transition, integrate the RSF into the army, and ascertain control over the country's militia fighters and their weapons. But by then, cracks were appearing between Dagalo and Burhan, and by April of that year, these cracks had fissured into an all-out rift. Fighting erupted at Khartoum International Airport among several other locations, in particular Darfur, the setting where massacres had taken place 20 years prior. Millions fled the violence and sought refuge in neighboring Chad and South Sudan. In July, the Intergovernmental Authority on Development, which is made up of 8 states around the Horn of Africa region, set up a meeting to initiate a peace process. In October 2023, the RSF took control of South Darfur's Niala, and that's when the tide started turning in Sudan. The RSF then took control of Wad Madani and the data center of Sudatel, the country's telecommunications service. Now, Wad Madani, which is the capital of the Jazeera state, is the second biggest city in Sudan. When war broke out in April, that's where a lot of internally displaced people fled to. The Battle of Wad Madani sent them fleeing again. Interestingly, there was very little pushback from the army, which had vacated the strategic city without much of a fight. Burhan blamed the fall of the state on negligent commanders and has, over time, accused the UAE of propping up the RSF. It got to a point where, in December 2023, Sudan expelled 15 Emirati diplomats. And this is where that plot thickens. Less than 2 weeks after Wad Madani came into RSF hands, its leader, Dagalo, embarked on a regional tour. First, he traveled to Uganda on a UAE chartered plane. Then he went to Ethiopia, Djibouti, then back to Ethiopia, where he met with a delegation of Sudan's Civil Democratic Forces Alliance, led by former PM Hamdok. After that, he went to Kenya, South Africa, Rwanda, and even attended the 42nd IGAD summit. Dagalo's tour also involved meeting with UN officials, including a phone conversation with Secretary General Antonio Guterres. Experts say that Dagalo's reception by regional leaders suggests he is gaining legitimacy from neighboring states. Dagalo's posturing as Sudan's head of state has sparked concerns about a possible attempted coup. The RSF now controls most of the western Darfur region, as well as Khartoum, and is advancing in Jazeera state. The death toll has been steadily rising all the while. One UN report in January estimated that between 10,000 and 15,000 people were killed in just one city in the West Darfur region. But violence is not the only killer in Sudan. Nearly 18 million people across Sudan are facing acute hunger, and more than 5 million are experiencing emergency levels of hunger in areas worst affected. As both parties jostle for control of Sudan, the lives and futures of more than 50 million Sudanese hang on the brink.